I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, in
Hi,
fact,
everybody. It's the PCI People-Centered Internet Call here, and it is the 10th of April. Delighted to have you with us. We have a great guest speaker with us today, Dave Witzel. I've known, Dave, how long have I known you? About maybe 15 years now?
I was thinking so, yeah.
About 15 years.
Through Mikulski probably, right?
Yeah, I think that we first met in something that is similar to PCI, that is, that's functionally a community that was an expression of, exploration and ideas. Dave, I think you would find that, the PCI community and some of the others that we've been part of, have a similar generative, feeling about them. And we're delighted to have Dave with us. When I first knew you, you were at the Environmental Defense Fund, right? So you were at EDF, right?
We might have met when I was still with the web company I founded with Forum One.
Okay.
Yeah, back in those eras. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so, the point is, your journey has taken you into a number of different interesting areas, and you are an explorer by nature, right? So I'm going to let you unpack your own professional background, but we're delighted to have you with us talking about regeneration and regenerative concepts. And expect a interesting Q&A. And I'm entering this with as much as you are sharing, right? Is I expect to learn quite a bit during our call today, because this is a topic I know a little about, but I'm going to enjoy learning more. So everyone, Dave Witzel.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and thanks for the invitation to do this. I got to say, it's been I haven't done this presentation before, kind of. I haven't even tried to explain these regeneration concepts to folks who are kind of not in the church. And it's been a really helpful kind of process to go through and try to organize thoughts in such a way that maybe I could explain them to people. So appreciate you guys being willing to be the guinea pigs in this process. And it is true that I kind of feel like I've kind of gotten to like the new great thing that I'm working on. I do think of it like when the web was launching back in the 90s, and like you were all these ideas about what you could do and where you were going to go, and I feel like I'm in a little bit of that same state. So I've drunk the Kool-Aid. So this is this is what you'll hear is kind of that bought-in thing. But a lot of the presentation is trying to understand what that process has been for me, and see if I can explain it to you. And I would love your feedback on that. Well, I'm going to go into my little Google slide so that I have my crutch. And
well, Dave's transitioning that. If you have questions, well, you guys are not shy, put your questions into the chat. And when we get to Q&A after his presentation, you can also use the raise hand function with reactions on the lower right-hand screen. Okay, Dave.
All right, let's see. I gotta get to the right here.
Here it comes.
All right, you guys seeing the slides?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so the notion was that this is to kind of explain the concept of regeneration as I'm exploring it. And one of the realizations that come from putting it together is that actually I had a bunch of insights from kind of the way I think about the internet. And so maybe that was more appropriate for this group, but it was also a realization for me. And part of it, this is also my backstory too. So, I don't need to do the introduction because you're going to hear it all. Very narcissistic of me. But I did feel like I had an epiphany. I know the day when I kind of latched onto this word regeneration. I was at a conference in San Francisco that David Hodgson had organized. He just brings together groups of people. And I was following around this guy, Mark Barash, who's an author, an interesting fellow. And Mark was talking about his regenerative agriculture projects in Africa and describing them to me. And like a light bulb went off. It's like, oh, you mean we could do better than sustainability was kind of the notion. And that's really stuck with me over the last 7+ years. And I kind of see it as one of the the things that will lead my the next how many ever years of productive labor I've got will be organized around this notion of regeneration and what does a regenerative future look like. But the epiphany to me is a funny thing, right? Because there's not many words for which I know the day I grokked them. So I've been kind of going back and trying to figure out how that happened. And so I was thinking, if you guys are patient with me today, I would try to explain regeneration in a way that hopefully you understand it. It's helping me try to figure out how to understand it too. It's still a nebulous term for me. And then I'm kind of curious whether you find that term interesting and compelling. Is it useful to you? And then third, I think the epiphany. I've heard other people who have had kind of similar experiences with this, recognition of another world. And I would love to have an epiphany manufacturing machine, can we bottle it? And so it's part of this is an exploration of where the epiphany comes from. And what are the threads that kind of help people see the world differently. So today I was going to go through just the threads that kind of make up that prepared me for the epiphany, if you will, my origin story. I'll give you a couple of definitions of regeneration from the people who are knowledgeable. The things that struck me most importantly about regeneration, and then there's more ways you guys can get involved if you have any interest. So like Kevin was starting to say, I had helped start a web company in DC back in the 90s. We did a lot of different things. We had a search engine at one point. We were kind of playing with domain name investments, but we ended up being a consulting firm that built websites. I built a whole lot of websites for the World Bank back when they were first building websites, and now they build for the African American Museum of Art, American History, US EPA, groups like that, and I was really, am really excited about how we built the internet, open source software, online community. We spent a ton of time talking about online community and how you build it. Kind of the questions of Web 2.0 as you were. And at the same time, I was running a business. And then from there went to working at Environmental Defense Fund and trying to kind of be more applied into areas of things that mattered. And I was working as head of a group that was to do business sustainability, help businesses become more sustainable. And if you want a really frustrating job, there's the one to go to, right? Then you end up spending a whole bunch of time thinking about efficiency, right? Because businesses are going to make money if they're more efficient, and therefore they'll want to do these things. So I spent a lot of time thinking about energy efficiency in large corporations. And I was working at Environmental Defense Fund. It's a very large environmental nonprofit. And I couldn't ever quite understand the strategy. We spent a lot of time talking about climate change and advertising and raising money around climate change. But if you looked at what we were working on, it didn't translate for me to like solving climate change. It's like the activities weren't as ambitious as the problem was. And that was kind of an ongoing frustration for me. And a whole bunch of our analysis was that people are the problem, right? And this notion of the Anthropocene was developing, and that that people determine the trajectory of the future. And I kind of buy it. I kind of think that we are deterministic in many ways, and we can kind of destroy a whole bunch of we can destroy our society or not. It's kind of up to us. And I think it's been an unintentional Anthropocene. We've kind of gotten to this point by accident. And I've wondered about what it would be like if we were doing it intentionally. What if, okay, we're responsible now, we're going to be stewards, but we're doing it with intent. And we are part of this system. We're not other than. So the notion that we should do conservation and like if we just keep people away, that things will be better. Kind of is like those things are always a little hurtful to me. And another thread was that a whole bunch of the the fundraising and stuff is all fear-based, right? If climate change is gonna happen, we're all gonna burn to death. The polar bears are starving. It's the motivations behind the environmental movement that I was a part of were all scary things. And it gets kind of tiring, and I know Peter Senge has this great line where he says that it's far too late for pessimism. I kind of, that was where I wanted to say, look, if I'm going to, this is the end of my life, I want to at least enjoy it, So the fear was exhausting. And then the other thing that it really occurred to me much in this week going through this stuff is that the insights from having, kind of lived through early stages of the internet, I started programming back in the 80s, I guess, I had, working on old versions of Linux back in the, it was my first job, and, in companies that came out of, wasn't way, it was Prime, I guess, back in the day. And seeing Wikipedia develop, right? Seeing Linux develop, seeing abundance kind of in practice, seeing the power of networks. I think we witnessed disruptive change. And like, I kind of want to do it again. Like, I want to be more engaged in this kind of a disruptive change. How do we do the internet again? And I think there are a bunch of themes that you can learn from the internet that are embedded in this notion of regeneration. And interestingly, I think a lot of the regeneration people don't come with this background, right? They're coming from other sectors, and they don't see some of these opportunities I think we might see because of our history. So I think those are the kinds of things that like teed me up, like opened me up to possibilities other than kind of environmental sustainability, which is the setting I was in. And so my work at Environmental Defense Fund kind of crashed and burned. I mean, like, the project ended. I don't think that many of the things that I worked on have survived, and I was like, whoa, what the heck just happened? And then that's kind of what was, so when I was following Mark Barash around on that day, that was I was coming from a place of failure. And so this is the phoenix rising from those ashes. But that gets back, and so the word regeneration, I'm using it a lot. I kind of latch onto it. I don't know that the word itself is that important. But there are a set of concepts that are bundled into it, and the concepts are worth understanding, I think. And I also feel like what we're trying to do is kind of create a big bucket, and a lot of kind of issues and ideas are actually getting kind of merged and mixed and networked together in this bucket. But I still use regeneration as the word. And so what does it mean? And the dictionary definition really isn't that bad, I think. It's like restore to a better state. You're not going to restore to the old state, or almost restore to the old state. We're going to make it better. So I think that was key. And that was a little bit, I think, of what I was really hooked by, was because I think I was, because of an efficiency focus, you're trying to be, you're taking kind of your current usage. This is even in the conversation around, do we have to stop travel, right? We're assuming we've got a certain level of travel, and the only thing we can do is reduce some of it, right? That's an efficiency argument, right? The best we could do is get rid of all the travel, right? And that might not be good enough, right? It may be, if you really want to stop climate change, we have to do better than get rid of all travel, right? And so then it makes me think that, again, we're kind of thinking about this problem backwards. So, maybe the better way is to have unlimited energy supplies that don't have carbon in them, right? And then we can have all the travel we want, right? Let's do that. Let's fly blimps that are all solar driven, things like that. And those were the kinds of ideas that opened up for me. And some of that comes from having a public policy background, studying some economics.
Economics business owners to help you through the current situation.
Is that me? And the economics being, it's a study of scarcity. We don't study abundance in economics. So how do we kind of? I feel like my vision of what was possible in the world had been capped. And the notion of regeneration helps me remove that cap. And so that's something I'm still exploring. A lot of the kind of, the cognoscenti in the world, Paul Hawken has a new book out called Regeneration. And he says he puts life at the center of every action and decision, which I think is probably a good guide. I wonder a little bit if that bias around life, which I think may mean biological life, is a blinder, right? I kind of think that the internet, was an emergent living phenomena, and it behaves in the ways that we want some of this regeneration to behave, but it's not biological life. So I kind of wonder if there's a blind spot in some of the thinkers, but people tie back to living systems a whole lot, and I can see it's very helpful to do it that way. So Bill Reed, who's like one of the people I find the easiest to understand around this stuff, and he's got some great videos if you want to Google around them, talks about regeneration as a means to transform and develop a collaborative relationship with nature. And again, I think that's, one of the things he'll say is that if your project only extracts from nature, if nobody else benefits, then it's not regenerative. And the idea, he goes on to say that the successful regeneration means to evolve and continually develop new potential. So one of the things I like about regeneration is that we tend to want to solve problems. Climate change is a problem, let's fix it. But I feel like the regeneration message is to achieve potential. So instead of reducing the negative, you're trying to achieve the positive. And again, I feel like for myself that's led to a lot of kind of different thinkings in the way I want to orient my efforts and think about the future. It's this word potential is really helpful to me. And then Carol Sanford's kind of my guru on this stuff, and I find her very confusing still. So I have to kind of go back and her stuff is kind of the more I read it, the more like, oh, that's what she meant, and she's right, but it takes a little bit of work for me to get through. And here she doesn't talk about living systems in this definition necessarily, but she does talk about disruptive innovation. She has kind of books and a process and stuff that talk about what regeneration is. And she's probably the person that there's a people, but she's one who definitely is kind of sticky about this word regeneration and what it means. And she's very worried about kind of greenwashing of this term, which is actually happening. It's a genuine concern. You can see Walmart wants to be the regeneration company, and it's like, really, are you do? So anyway, but she's a great person to read and listen to her podcasts and stuff if any of it's interesting for more. Regeneration isn't the only word that's hitting around this realm. I know Michelle Holliday for a couple of decades now has been talking about thrivability, and Gene Russell's in that group. And Todd, you probably know more folks that are working on this kind of stuff than I do. I think to me, they're very related concepts. I don't know if Michelle makes a big distinction or not. And then, of course, there's this problem that maybe we're not supposed to define the term. By defining it, you put a limit on it, and that's not regeneration. So I've kind of ended up being that this is a process of discovery. We have to know kind of where we're working in the space, but regeneration is kind of inherently process oriented. So we're never going to have a lead standard for regeneration, because that would be a non-regenerative approach, right? To have a checklist of have you been regenerative? Check, 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 check. That should never work. We have to have some more of a process kind of definition and measure of whether what we're doing is regenerative. How's this landing for folks? Should I just keep powering on?
Dave, our format is that you unpack your thesis, and then we take questions. We don't have a primal question sitting in the chat right now that's a showstopper. So I would suggest that you keep moving forward, and we'll get to the thoughtful questions in a bit.
Okay. All right. This is probably the kind of the regeneration graph that I find the easiest to understand. In some sense, it's the 4 boxes, right? Because I needed the 4 boxes. But this is a Bill Reed product, and you can kind of see. I'd say we've been kind of far down on the left-hand side, and what we're trying to do is get up onto the right-hand side. And then this notion of sustainability, where we're kind of trying to do no more damage than we've already done notionally, is not a good place to be. And again, I feel like paradigmatically, it requires different thinking to get up into that top right box. And that's, to me, I think a lot of the excitement from the term is that we can, it's helped me to see new options. And Bill talks about, he's coming from kind of a development landscape development perspective, and he says, our current landscape development strategy is to stay, just one step ahead of the law. And here with the regenerative framework, like we want to be way better than the law, kind of. So we're trying to move into a totally different dimension.
Dave, this is not your chart. This is you're sharing a chart. Who,
Yeah.
Bill Reed? Okay,
Bill
because
Reed,
I
yeah.
can't read the fine print.
Yeah, and I've got the deck. I'm happy to share this. You know, the
That's
Google
great.
deck,
Please
and
do.
I put links in most of the comments stuff. So
Okay.
I did try to create references for the stuff.
So go back for a second. So I just want to make sure I ask the question. Is the chart that you were showing, is ecological design and regenerative, are those kissing cousins?
Yeah, so he's putting regenerative up in the top left bucket.
Okay.
And so well, I'll get to it just a little bit, but ecological design, I'd say, has been one of the threads that has led into regenerative thinking.
Okay.
It wasn't one of my threads, but for a lot of other people, it has been. I mean, one of the, and so like it's fun to be able to go back and touch on Buckminster Fuller, right? Because he of course was on this topic. And here's, some stuff that I think I stole this from David McConville, who has some great overviews of these kinds of topics as well. But we are in an intellectual, a regenerating system, and the question is, are we going to support life forever, or are we cosmically bankrupt? He kind of laid out the bet for us. And I think that, to me, this is the bottom line. This is the excitement of, the things that we could be working on, is how do we, continue to foment and improve this regenerating system. I do think one of the things that's been really important for me is to kind of see some of these stories in practice a little bit. I mean, it is on the kind of on the ground. You can see it, and so I'm going to try to show a video. And are you seeing a video screen here, Kevin?
Yes, we are.
The Kamako story here. Let me just. This is a quick little video, and I'll maybe we can speed it up because it doesn't have a lot of background noise, but. I hope that wasn't too fast, but it's one of my favorite kind of regenerative agriculture stories, and they tell this in the video, I think, a little bit from a kind of a traditional perspective. I'm not, we might the arguments about what's the meaning of scale in a regenerative world and things like that. But what excites me about it is you can see the cascading benefits, right? It wasn't like, oh, we're going to go in and sequester carbon and pay people in the carbon market, right? It's we're going to create a system wherein people are going to have a better life and animals are going to have a better life and the land's going to get healthier and we're going to, you know, all of these things simultaneously. And this, you know, so we can in fact do projects that have, you know, multiple benefits simultaneously. And that's, you know, that's a better objective than trying to play whack-a-mole with the individual social issues that we're dealing with. That has been one of the motivators for me. And then another stream of kind of how to understand regeneration that I think is a lot of fun is there's some new kind of literatures that are growing up. One of them is solar punk. So it's, you know, riffing off of cyberpunk, but with a positive, optimistic, beautiful touch to it. So we're starting, you know, some of the Kim Stanley Robinson stuff, I think you would argue is kind of moving into the solar punk or you know, certainly climate fiction, but also a little bit of a, you know, we can solve this kind of problem, or we can imagine a world wherein, you know, society is being regenerative as opposed to degenerative. So I would just flag solar punk as an area to kind of pay attention to if you get in the mood for something new. So going through this whole story, then there's a few things that I think, and some of them I've probably already mentioned, but things that struck me particularly as a value from the notion of regeneration. So these are the things that I kind of latch onto. I think of it as pretty optimistic. It's not that the world's all doom and gloom and we're going to burn to death in the next generation, right? It's like the world's going to be better, you know. And some of it's this notion of abundance. I mean, I just don't think we've paid enough attention to the potential of abundance or designing for abundance. I don't even think we know what that means. But we saw it on the internet, right? We see the zero marginal cost things. We know the long tail of creation that Clay Shirky talks about, right? We know that Linux was built and now drives a ton of the world, right? So we I think from an internet background can see for some of these things that perhaps other people can't. And living systems tend to be abundant. I mean, when I was a kid, you grew up with the knowledge that it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch of topsoil. And I always just took that as a fact. I mean, I didn't know a lot of biology, but that's what it's supposed to be. It turns out that if you're actually working, if people are involved and they're actively managing the land, you can have dramatic improvements in topsoil in 2 or 3 years, right? It happens really fast. Living systems can rebound really quickly, and people can help with that process. We're not having to be other than, we actually participate actively in it. The notion that things could be positive sum is important to me. Like, again, the focus on efficiency, where the best you can do is get rid of whatever it is you're working on. The notion of net zero, I think, is real problematic. I just don't see why that's good enough. It doesn't do us any good if the world goes net zero if you're already in deficit, right? Somebody has to do better than that. So I think that's an artificial cap we put on a lot of our thinking. The regeneration stuff tends to be living systems. It tends to be networky. It tends to be open. There's porous boundaries. Again, I feel like these were things that kind of like our insights that come from the internet for me. One of the most useful kind of units of analysis is a bioregion, right, or a watershed or a landscape. So we're trying to do landscape regeneration. You want to know the natural course of the water system, and that actually is a really constructive way to think about how to invest and how to plan and stuff. And of course, if you have a whole watershed, then you have a whole bunch of different actors within that watershed, villages and businesses, and different kinds of characteristics of animals and history and all these different things. So understanding that bioregion becomes critical, and then being able to kind of coordinate and communicate across it becomes essential if you're going to have successful regeneration efforts. And then this idea of living systems, and a lot of it, the biomimicry kinds of ideas, so that we're kind of learning from watching the living world, trees communicating and fungi, and the results the last week or so about having that fungi have language, kind of these notions that we're just, I think, starting to give credit to living systems and moving away from our mechanical reductionist models. Again, I feel like this has just opened up a lot of possibilities for me in terms of my thinking. And I know that the things that struck me aren't necessarily the things that have struck other people, right? So there are these other threads that are being tied together by regeneration that I think makes it more resilient. one of the dominant threads seems to be permaculture. And I don't know how many of you guys have been involved in permaculture. Todd, you might have done some, but I don't even have a garden, so I didn't come in from this direction. But a lot of people are taking a learning regeneration via permaculture, or many people I think are saying like permaculture is sufficient for me. I don't need this regeneration concept. But and now we're talking about social permaculture and other kinds of other applications of the field. Indigenous knowledge has certainly been an important one for a lot of folks. Again, I'm not indigenous in an American sense, and so don't have that background, but it has been a driver for a lot of people. And I don't know if anybody's read Braiding Sweetgrass by Kinner, I guess. It's a lovely exploration of kind of science and indigenous knowledge kind of being integrated together. And she's really a poet. Bill Reed and his group come from a landscape and development kind of background. They'll be brought into like a petroleum plant, and they say we need to redevelop this petroleum plant, but the community doesn't want us to. What do we do? And so he's able to kind of make the problem bigger in a way that says, look, let's think about this from a bioregional perspective, and how do we make the community better? And so there's some case studies online that are great to have that kind of story coming from. But it's a particular realm. There's a bunch of people who are coming into this from systems thinking and complexity theory. And so again, I think they're seeing regeneration. I would claim it's an application of some of this. So I keep trying to talk about systems doing. The thinking's not enough. We're doing what we do, but regeneration kind of gives you a structure, I think, for systems doing. A lot of people are moving into this sort of some sense of community and co-living. The transition towns and eco villages and a whole bunch of kind of common notions that I think have built on, the co-living arrangements, even from the 60s, are emerging and connecting into a regeneration thread. And then there must be other characteristics that I haven't identified yet, but I do feel like it's been a good, one of the tests for me of the concept is that people are able to enter it from a lot of different doors. And I think that's been true. And then I find that the concept has been helpful. I stick the word regeneration in front of a bunch of different things. So regenerative agriculture, clearly, you can go visit a regenerative farm and you can tell it's different. You'll see that it has many, many more crops. You'll see that you'll often notice that there's more birds. It doesn't stink. You can go to a regenerative cattle farm and it doesn't smell bad, right? It's not like driving down I-5 and seeing the industrial cattle farm. You can talk to the farmers and you talk about their quality of life. So you can tell that they're dramatically different. And actually, I can stick a link in the chat or something. There's a map on online of a bunch of regenerative farms around the country, and I would encourage you to go visit one if you have it, because they're just it's a visceral experience of this. Regenerative economics. What's that mean to not study scarcity? To study something else or in addition to regenerative landscapes for sure. And I actually think that's kind of the unit of analysis I want to spend a lot more time on. Is just that I feel like we can kind of make a difference landscape by landscape. Farm by farm is hard, right? Because a farm is still embedded in a non-regenerative space. So if you can kind of capture a landscape, then you're able to kind of have the critical unit, I think. Regenerative justice, which I actually think we're working on, which is called restorative justice, but it's reconnecting, right? It's the reconnecting of people. Instead of banning people into prison, you reconnect them into society. So it's I think a generative process. And I've been, what does regenerative defense look like? It's like, instead of blowing shit up, what would we be doing? So anyway, I just kind of feel like it's helpful and fun to put that word in front of a different category and see. I often find that I'll get new insights from trying to apply these things. And that's it, really. I'm involved with the regeneration pollination, which is every week or two, there's a speed networking event where people who are kind of learning this regeneration thing get together and just chat with each other in one-on-one sessions. So that's a lot of fun. If you get in the mood, please join. I'm also coordinating the Global Regeneration CoLab, which is something that David Hodgson stood up a couple of years ago, but a few of us have continued to maintain. It is peer-to-peer support for regeneration change makers is the conceit. So people who are kind of in search of or in development of some kind of a project or an effort around regeneration get together and are able to commiserate and share ideas and connections and experiences and stuff. I've got an old newsletter called The Wave that I linked to here. that has, some of my brief riffs. They're kind of smaller than a blog usually, about various regeneration things that I used for the presentation. Some of it's still useful, so I would point at that. Yeah, that's my pitch. I'd be curious, kind of like, has it been helpful?
Yeah, we really appreciate you unpacking that. I think this is helpful to you, all right, to kind of get it all into one space, all right, and on paper so that you can advance it, all right. So let's start forming some questions. I have some from chat. Before we go into full Q&A, want to make a couple of observations and announcements. The first one is Ben Konsinski has joined us as a member of the Guests and Speakers Committee for PCI. So Ben, we're delighted to have you as part of our team with me, with Lynn Wells, and with Casey Komlosky. So delighted to have you. You're always one of our faithful participants, and we're glad to have your additional thoughts about who we feature, people like Dave. We noticed that Mei Lin was just brought in as a Hasso-Plattner Institute Fellow. So we're delighted for her and wish her all the best. And I'll say on a personal note, for those of you who expressed and sent positive energy our way while Heidi was in the hospital, she's on the mend, and we expect her back from her resident physical therapy at the end of this coming week. So thank you for all of your good thoughts for us. So let me start with the first person who posted. I think, Doug, you posted before Dave started to speak. Is Doug Holland. And what did you think about what Dave said, and what's sparking for you?
Yeah, well, a great talk. I really like the video, because that's the essence of kind of what I believe is like, how do you give people the tools to change their world and make our world a more sustainable place, right? And the reason I posted that is, Kevin, when you mentioned that you don't want to go to any more conferences, just sit into a meeting room when you could just be on a Zoom session, right? And see the same content, right? The only question is how can we have the networking effect? Because you go to in my opinion, you go to a conference for two reasons. One is to learn information, which is probably, in my opinion, only 10 to 20% of that. The other is to do networking, to meet people and interesting people. So, if we can do things online, you save so much carbon dioxide emissions by being doing it remotely versus in person. I think it's like a ton of CO2 gas emissions per business trip. So, and the average person in a year on the world uses 4 to 5 tons. The average American uses 16 tons a year. So you're using up your carbon footprint budget quickly when you're doing a lot of travel. So that's why, I don't know how we're going to go to net zero emissions without changing the way we travel and the way we work and the way we, go to school even and learn. So that's why, that's my emphasis. But going back to the talk, I think having great use case examples of how you can model this and make the world better is very helpful.
I would say one of the things that you just said, Doug, is inherent in what Dave was suggesting to us, which is it's a hurdle that's difficult to get over, is you have to stop thinking about net zero. You have to be more optimistic. As he suggested, we need to start thinking about, well, where are the unlimited energy supplies that would allow us to move our molecules around, with and do better. Dave, you're on mute. So need you to rejoin us.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Do you find that people are having difficulty getting over the current construct into this more optimistic frame when you unpack it for them?
Yeah, no, that really is the thing, and that's why I felt like I was trapped in the net zero world, right? And I feel like I've been trying to move into a positive sub world, and it's hard. I think we're fighting against a lot of our instincts, but a lot of the analysis has been like, we need to, people, if you think about kind of what people are talking about around climate change, like we need to kill half the people on the earth. Some of these costs are pretty high. And it's like, really, that's our solution? Can't have anything better than that. Let's at least talk about nuclear energy first.
That's the Thanos solution, right? Right. Marvel Comics, kill half the population. All right. Doesn't sound appealing.
But I do think, and I think, I'll find the video. There's another great video that's like, it comes out of Matt, who's the old box guy, has done some writing about, like, actually what we need is more energy. We need lots of energy. What's the lots of energies framework look like? And so,
yeah, absolutely. Ben, we said nice things about you, and then you were in chat. So please jump in. I think you put some pretty interesting comments in the chat about abundance.
Yeah, I had drawn attention to the point that David was bringing out about our preoccupation with scarcity. And a part of it has to do with our sense of economics, that often our pursuit of value and valuation leads us to attention to scarcity, often more so than abundance. And a clear example of that is NFTs. That NFTs themselves create scarcity from abundance. You have an artifact that is available in abundance, and we create an artificial scarcity on it in order to seek value and perceived valuation. And it's like the Kamako story. It's an instantiation. It's a good imaging model. And look at the synergies in the forest, and you're talking about lichens exchanging information and what is a quote intelligence, but behind that, as you look at that kind of thing. And it's sort of I had flashbacks to Mind Walk images from the 70s.
What is that? What is Mind Walk?
All right,
somebody from
else.
The 80s, actually. There's a movie from the 80s where these three philosophers take a walk around this castle city off the coast of France, and they have an amazing conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, Liev Ullman and Judd Hirsch and Wanamaker, Sam Wanamaker. It's about holistic thinking and living systems, sort of Miller-esque living systems.
Okay. Well, thanks for that reference. It's I'm sure that would be interesting, to people who are diving into NFTs and crypto, that you're saying that we're creating scarcity out of abundance. That's a pretty interesting thought. Lynn Wells, you were in chat. Share, please.
Yeah, so this is absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. The question I had, looking at the graphic, and it's obviously a simplification, but it looks like sort of a linear arrow. And one of the things that we've been looking at Mason Center for Resilient and Sustainable Communities is that resilience is not bouncing back to a pre-crisis status quo, but adapting to the post-crisis new normal so that you wind up stronger. And so the goal is, how do you bounce forward better rather than bounce back? It seems to me that's consistent with the kind of things you're talking about. It just postulates, instead of having a continuing movement to this better world, there are going to be ups and downs and backs and forwards. And how do you, so I think adaptability has got to play a large role in this regenerative piece. Or am I missing something?
I like that a lot, Lynn. Yeah, I think the bounce beyond thing is, and I think it is a linear graph, and that's kind of probably why I like it, made it easier for me to understand. But you got to get into this stuff from some direction, right? So I'll use a handicap of a line for a little while. But yeah.
I see
I mean,
hands
there's
up.
all this discussion around, people are against growth. And, it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, we see exponential curves lots of places, don't we? I mean, like we can't just wish away exponential curves, right? We, somehow or another we have to grapple with them, I think.
So we have a comment in chat from Todd, and I see hands up from Pat and Graham. Let's go to Graham first, then Todd, then Pat. Graham?
I just wanted to say thank you for this. I really applaud the idea that hope is better than fear. Hope for an even better future is better than fear that, the polar bears are going to starve to death. The idea of abundance with a reasonable track forward without destroying the environment, making it better, I think that can energize efforts in research and otherwise. But I don't know how to get there. I'm glad that other people are thinking of this, people who are more in this, but I applaud all of that and want this to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, for your thoughts. Todd? Todd Hoskins.
I didn't put a question. I think I was involved in the chat without putting a question, but I will take the chance to thank Dave for this. This is years of synthesizing and bringing stuff into a form that others can understand. So I want to offer appreciation for that. And also that we take this regenerative movement, which does have a force of gravity to it, and find our close neighbors and invite them, because the word regenerative does not resonate with everyone. And I think that's the one difficulty with what I'm sensing. And I saw that you had a very open, embracing take on it. And especially enjoyed that you refused to define things. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
How do we talk about things but we can't define them? Yeah, it's a very funny status. Well, and I'd be curious, Todd, what other like terms of art or groups that I was like trying to go back and figure out so we're hosting part of let's see, back 3 or 4 steps. I think there's a regeneration movement. I would like to see it occur, right? So this is kind of where I'm going to spend my next years of my life trying to work on this kind of thing. I think a movement, like kind of by definition, needs a network, right? So this is like internetworking thinking. And so how do you build a network? And I think you have to build a network. You have to connect at the edges, right? So the ecotone or whatever. And so the definitions at the edges have to be flexible a little bit. If you always exclude people who don't agree with you, then you can never build a network. So I was thinking, like for our speed networking, we want to find people on the edges. Let's do some Google ads and advertise and see if we get people to come. And like I've failed completely at getting people to click through on Google ads. I don't think I have the right terms, or I don't think I'm able to frame this in a way where people see themselves in such a way that they want to participate. And so, it gets down to you still need the words, right?
Yeah.
Have you tried partnering?
Dave, I'll ask a question, then Graham, I'm curious what you were going to say. Dave, would you be willing to publish the phrase combinations that you were trying? I think it would be interesting for everyone to see it's AdWords is a crazy beast. So I don't think it has anything to do with your word choice, but I think it's informative what was not attracting people.
Sure, I'd be happy to and I'd love to get better at it. People still think it might be an angle.
By the way, I might suggest, as Todd is saying, is that if regenerative sounds mechanistic as opposed to what it really is, when I gave you a donation to the Regenerative CoLab, maybe the spot inside there where I can help you add some value is maybe we need to create a more attractive mimetic name, right, for the space, right, that would be inclusive, right? So we can take that offline, but I'm glad to have that conversation. Naming stuff is part of my my bag of tricks, and I'm pretty good at it. So I have a long track record of making things stickier in terms of giving things names. I have been part of the thrivability thing for, a while. And, I don't like sustainability because the root word of sustainability is sustain. Okay. And so that means not going to get better. Right. So I kind of reject that out of hand. You said a number of times, more optimistic. Well, that's what I think we need to go for. Graham, then Pat.
So it's a rather deep field, the idea of optimizing the advertisement that someone's going to see. Whatever works the best right now may not work the best a week from now. And the people that I know that work on this, it's a full-time job. And the best that people can do right now is just to keep reacting and trying different things and looking at Google Trends and analytics. You should probably partner with someone who can do that, someone who's enthusiastic about that.
Regenerative SEO.
It's kind of funny, but I don't know. I think it's a good idea. I'd love to, Graham. Yeah, and I feel we don't have a lot of money, so I feel bad about trying to piggyback.
Someone should do this for free. Someone who's already an expert in SEO and very enthusiastic about the environment.
Yeah, Pat.
Can you all
Pat's
hear me okay?
channel.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, join us.
I'm on a new headset. I'm walking through the woods with my dogs. I just want to thank everybody for such a thoughtful Sunday conversation. It's quite the antidote to the weekly doom scrolling we all seem to be stuck with. I'm going to build on what Ben and Lynn said. I think we need something different than regenerative. And forgive me for invoking this, but when I hear regenerate, it means to me get back to where we used to be, to make something great again, so to speak. And most of the work that I do, whether it's in technology or around cognition, deals with disruption. And disruption in my mind is more like a paradigm change. All the rules change. The old vernaculars, languages, cultures, and most importantly, values no longer apply. So when I look forward, I don't try to regenerate back to something that's better than sustainable. The first thing I do is I say, with respect to what values. But if I was to try and find an alternative, maybe not a wordsmith that you are, but I would suggest progenerative, because what I'm trying to do in my work is tell people to explicitly begin to look at the values that they hold dear and understand which of them they're going to have to let loose of, because the abundance that Ben talks about and I talk about in my writing is in areas that we begin to quickly discount, and then we develop new needs and new wants, and that's where we have scarcity. But if we can say, here are the things that we value that we want to build towards, here are the things that we're willing to trade because we can't go back again. I don't know, am I just covering ground that others have done? I'm pretty familiar with Hawkins' work, and I too think he has some really brilliant visionary work, but he's got some blind spots. So Dave, am I just stating things that people have said years and years ago over the last couple of decades on this topic?
No, I don't think so, Pat. I think you're kind of like got your finger in the pie there. I'm grumpy about, so Paul Hawken wrote the Regeneration book, and I was thinking, oh, finally we'll have a tome that we can point at and say, Paul wrote this book, and now everybody can understand regeneration. And I don't like it. I think he wrote a book that was like a climate change book, like Drawdown, and he put the name regeneration on it. And it's like, no, that's not what regeneration. So I don't feel like, and I think that I've been trying to avoid. I came into regeneration from a sustainability characteristic, right? So I do think of it, I guess, as better than sustainability. But I don't think that's the logic I'm trying to get away from a little bit. It really is a paradigm shift. The orientation around living systems, around abundance, it's not, this is a little bit better than sustainability. This is a different way to look at the world, and it's a different way to engage in the world, right? It's not the world serving people, it's people engaged in all of the world, right? And so these are, I think, pretty fundamental. Well, this is the question I'm asking you guys. To me, these are fundamental changes, not incremental changes. And so, and whether or not regeneration as a word is the right word, I agree. I don't know, and it's an endless conversation, probably.
So let me just add on there. So I'm rereading Ecology of Commerce, and I forgot how much I missed in my first read through. So it's a really groundbreaking book, but I don't think he sufficiently re-envisioned American enterprise such to make it compelling. He tried to articulate quote, new model using old values of profits and revenues and shareholder value. And I think today with some of the new literature, there's a chance to re-envision it. So in that case, it wouldn't be a regeneration. It would be a proscriptive, conscious architecture of a new type of business, but you'd have to get agreement of the different stakeholders of which the values are going to matter, which ones we're going to invest in. So that's one of the blind spots. But of course, you wrote that 25 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in the accounting, who gets the profits is, you're beginning to see more books, coming out that, profitability isn't inherently a problem. It's that, the investment at a profit level might be back to stakeholders instead of shareholders. And if you do that, all right, now you're investing in a larger scale and a much more systems way of thinking about, society profits. All right. Anyway, let's go to Barry Gleason. Barry.
I want to say thank you for this. It's been really interesting. And I come from a perspective of trying to think about the economics of innovation. And what I'm hearing here is more about which way do we want the innovation to go? I mean, I think one of the places that we really do have abundance is in the innovation space. We have lots of innovation that we don't pay attention to and we don't celebrate enough, I think. And so this is interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I don't have Richard's last name, but we have Richard with us who posted a comment in chat. Richard, we'd be delighted to have you join us.
Hey, this is Rich Hammond. I'm just being anti-camera today.
That's all right. Any thoughts? Do you want to share a question, Dave?
You're raising your hand to interrupt us and say you're anti-camera. Is that what you're doing, Rich?
No, I just was going to suggest the word emergence, but I'll just carry on with that prattle just a touch and say that there's a funny thing about emergence in that, if you, I'll just say it the way I say it, you put enough particles together and you get emergence. And why that happens, etc., I'm not really sure, and I'm not sure it's a solution to any of the problems. But I like the idea of removing roadblocks for things to flourish, along a path of less resistance, shall we say? So that's what I would say about that. And very briefly, although I've never worked it out, but when we first went on COVID world leave, and before that, I had always had the thought of just turning on my camera 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or whatever, and just leaving it on so that people, when they had those little water cooler moments, they could, knock on my door and say, hey, are you there? And I could just flip my camera down. It doesn't remove any more privacy than I had in my cube. So I just, I'll toss that out as, I think it's going back to Doug's comment about conferences. I agree. It's the one missing element. It's the nighttime dinner and the walk, around the concession stand and stuff where a lot of work gets done. And so I've just thought about being online sort of in a permanent way, although that's a little creepy on its own. And that's it.
No, we actually had an experiment where we had the cameras going bidirectionally between an office in the United States and an office in Germany, and you could just walk by the wall and ask questions of your colleagues. It was good. The meal one was a little bit less functional. It really needed the Cisco or the telepresence, to really work well. We're at the bottom of the hour. All right, so this is where I say thank you to everyone who chose to be with us for our first formal hour. And Dave, thank you so much for your presentation. Now is overtime, right? For those who want to stay with us to continue the conversation, we would be delighted to have you with us. But for those who need to go, we're glad you could join. Doug, you have your hand back up. So we're going to go full circle. You asked the first question and you're going to ask the first question for overtime.
Yeah, and Pat, one of his comments he made reminded me of Dr. Morris's book from Stanford, Why the West Rules for Now. And he looks at how economic growth, societal growth One of the areas is energy capture, because I think if we could figure out how to capture energy, then we can have abundance for all. And if we can't figure out energy capture, we're going to be a lot poorer off and do a lot worse things. So, that's an area that I'm very passionate about. How do you have sustainable, I use the word sustainable energy, but, and the problem is, some of the, what we call green energy has its issues just as much, is how do we transition? It'd be great if we could do it in the next 10 years, but looking at all the data, I question that a little bit. And the only way is innovation, right? I mean, the sun is shining and it is providing, 200,000 times more power than we need on this planet for humans. But how do you capture that? That doesn't require digging up a whole bunch of lithium out of the mines and nickel and cobalt and all those other things. So these are the challenges we have, and innovation. I'm a big believer in innovation, and the way we have abundance is to have innovation and encourage innovation.
All right, Doug, thanks so much. Kate Vac, I saw your hand up and then it went down, but we would be delighted to hear from you in Switzerland, if that's where you are today. We'd be glad to have you join our conversation. Kate, we can't hear you. You're
I'm so much looking forward. Thank you very much. I was in the background really following all these discussions because one of our values in the faculty is sustainability, and I really tried to challenge my colleagues. What exactly do we mean? With just like empty keyword and a bit of statement. And now I have ammunition. I just wanted to thank. Now I have more ammunition to discuss it, and this particular theoretical approach was really sparkling a lot of ideas in my brain. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for being with us today. I mean, one of the things that has gotten a lot of traction, Dave, are ESG goals, environmental sustainability goals, right? So right there, okay, in that acronym is your challenge, right? Is, the environmental sustainability goals are inherently not regenerative.
Yeah, and ESG is more complicated, right? Because I don't think that's what the former term is. The formal term is like environment, society, and governance or something, right? Isn't it?
Well, we've it gets used a couple of different ways, but yeah, you're right. And I should know that both you and your wife are policymakers, so you would know these really well.
Well, no, I don't know that that's necessarily true. And the other, of course, the implementation has been the SDGs, right?
Yes.
From the UN
Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things that, like, it's just how do you think through this stuff? And there's definitely a piece of my concern for myself that's like, somebody else that was saying the same thing. Is this really old or is it new? It's new to me, but has everybody else already figured this stuff out? And, the Sustainable Development Goals break all these things into boxes. And if they really are systemic and emergent, then we got to figure out how the boxes are connected. And so part of our thinking has to be that. And I do feel like the problem orientation, if what we're doing is solving a series of problems, and we're losing that potential possibility. Right? So for me, one of the fundamental lessons has been that we need to be looking at the potential, not the problem. I mean, the problem certainly must sit there in our mind, but the goal is to achieve the potential. And if you achieve the potential, then the problems go down. But I think that somehow we got to hook the boxes together.
Okay, so one of the things I see Pat Scannell's hand up. I have a question for you. It was part of my prep, right? So I'm going to remind you. So what do you need, right? I mean, to move the agenda forward that you've unpacked for us. What do you need to move this forward?
There's several layers. I mean, this has been just in itself very, very helpful to me, Kevin, and thanks for the invitation. I mean, I really do my thinking has improved a lot, and you guys have had to suffer because of it. And so I feel like I'm able to say this better than I was before I went down this little path. One of the things I'm comfortable with right now is that this is a generational problem. It is a paradigmatic shift. And I think there's a certain amount of patience that is implied by that. So I'm going to try to how long does it take to absorb these major ideas into society? And I think it takes a lot. So I'm willing to be patient with it. And so allies is kind of what you need, people who are willing to engage in the conversation and give feedback. And I think that's really the critical thing. I mean, if you really want to get involved in stuff, please like come to Regeneration Pollination or contact me about the GRC, or there's if you really want to make it a life effort. But I feel like the real success will be when kind of a regenerative mindset is the dominant mindset, right? That we're not doing the reductionist mindset, we're doing this generative mindset. And that trend, how do we achieve that transition? It's like, well, I don't know. I think we keep pounding on it.
Sure. Pat, your hand was up, but it's not up anymore. Was there a thought that you wanted to share? Okay. Let me
Sorry about that, Kevin. I just wanted to connect 3 points that were made. We talk about emergent. The idea is this old or new, and then my point about paradigm change. I mean, if you apply complexity sciences and chaos theory to this, what you'll find is that by definition, there has to be some emergent properties of the new system, especially if we're going through the paradigm change that I talk about. So the complexity of all this means we cannot bring just old tools to this. We can't bring old mindsets or old values. But I don't suspect that's what the group is talking about. But I point out, yeah, I don't know if this is old or new, but it can't be completely old because the circumstances, the paradigms, the rules have all changed around here. And that also means it can't be perfectly predicted or prescribed. There's a high amount of uncertainty that we're going into. So going back to Lynn's point, if we enter into this humble, looking into lessons from the past, but expecting new and emergent and uncertain things that we can't predict, that gives us our highest readiness and adaptability. I'll shut up there, Kevin.
Thanks for sharing that. You never have to shut up, right? At least not in this group. So you're putting into the chat, real dream of clean energy. What is
kind
that,
of responding to Doug? We had a little bit, but this is the video I was talking about that talked about like what we really need is lots of energy. I thought it was nice. And Pat, I really appreciate that comment. I mean, I don't know. So kind of again, from a personal perspective, I feel like a lot of my perspective of what a disruptive transition looks like has come from the internet, right? I mean, Wikipedia doesn't work in theory, right? Linux doesn't work in theory. I mean, that was kind of that was what we thought, I think, in the 80s. 70s maybe, I don't know, back a long time ago. And now it does work, right? And that abundance, that pre-competitive layer, the collaboration that went into it, we demonstrated a whole bunch of things that I don't think people thought were possible the generation before, when we were building interstate highways through poor areas of big cities, right? I mean, we had a very different mindset during that period. And so, I kind of feel like, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. If somebody bends it, it doesn't do it naturally. It happens because people are working on this effort. And so for me, the regeneration thing, it changes the emergence because the possibilities that I can see have changed, right? I removed that cap above net zero, and now I can think positive. And it allowed new possibilities, and those are now emergent. I don't know, some logic that works like that, I guess. And so, I feel like it's like you do control the direction of this, and you don't control the direction of this, but you nudge it, I guess. So that's my hope anyway. That's gives me meaning to live.
I might suggest that as you move your presentation forward into its next version, Dave, I'll let our visual intelligence team inside of Content Evolution help you, because some of the word charts could very easily be visualized in a way that would make them more compelling. So more quickly grasped too. So we've heard from a lot of folks. Coco, glad to have you with us. You saw some of the presentation, the video. What's your experience? Tell Dave where you are, and then what you think about this presentation. Where are you joining us from, Coco? Your microphone's not on, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. David, for this presentation. Really, the regeneration, taking the example as in Democratic Republic of the Congo, according to the last study done by the World Bank, in Congo, they decide to make regeneration of the educations because the former education curricula didn't correspond actually now with the country which want to be developed. So they decide to make regeneration of the country, of the education for the development of the country. And now actually the Ministry of Education decide to change all the curricula of the education. And from this year, I think from this year, and the country have to start with a new curriculum of education. It's very hard, and I discover many things here in this presentation that to succeed in new regenerations, we don't need only to be optimistic. We don't need only to get abundance or to think positive sounds. We need to change strategies. And this can be applied in many things, not only in education, not only in agriculture, but also in generation of the energy, where we can come with another theory of co-generations to help or to reinforce the regeneration. Thank you very much, if you can understand me.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Coco.
Yes.
Yeah, education seems like such a great opportunity for kind of some of this thinking, and how do you make learning abundant? Because that's yeah, let's do that.
And potentially applying regenerative thinking to what we're teaching, the curriculum itself, right? More than simply being refreshed, right? But being looked at current context. All right. So let me just go around. Has anyone not been able to ask a question that they wanted to ask? All right, let me go into chat and see, because we do have so no more new questions. So what I'm going to ask us to do is, Dave, let's do a little wrapper around this. So you've discovered this. I put in the chat at the beginning, I think that this was the subgroup that David Hodgson had at SOCAP, right? Wasn't it that social?
Hodgson's definitely been on this thread for a long time, and I tend to be several steps behind him. Yeah.
But that was the venue down at in San Francisco, right?
Oh, I don't know. This is it's like a global. Oh, where I ran into Brosh. It was like the Global Leadership Lab, I think. I don't know.
Okay, so it was something else.
It was probably one of.
Because I know that I was in a session with you at a SOCAP conference with Dave, right?
Okay.
And it was a subgroup away from the main tent. It was in the side building.
Yeah. No, he's kind of like, he's had his finger into this, and then
right.
And I've been kind of following him around since.
Because I think that was also Global Footprint Network was in that session.
That would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, have you tried to make any connections with the Buckminster Fuller Institute?
Yeah, we kind of track pretty closely what BFI is doing, and And then Faith in particular has been participating in GRC and stuff. Yeah.
Because they're looking for a new leader. The person who was running BFI just exited. So seed the clouds, all right? I mean, there's clearly some birds of a feather, right, that could, come together in this space.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how much of the BFI is to preserve Bucky's memory and how much of it's to like kind of further his thinking, and it'd really be interesting to know more about. I don't really know the background of what it would be like to be the ED at BFI.
Now, there you go. So your closing thoughts.
Well, just mostly appreciation to you, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me to do this. Like I said, I really have benefited from it, and I appreciate the dialogue a lot. So I'm going to save the chat and go back through these things. Pat, I have been kind of following Game B out of the corner of my eye, and I do feel like I kind of find it reassuring that there seems to be a lot of kind of overlapping issues and concepts, and I wish I had a better map kind of in my head, but I think the ideas are. I'm more confident in their resilience because other people seem to be pushing it the same kinds of things, but from different angles. So that I find that is reassuring. Yeah, and I'm happy to talk more if people have any interest or want to be more involved or anything like that. Please reach out to me. I'll stick my email in the chat.
And please, I picked up all the chat, but also please just send me a link directly of the link to your Google charts. And I will send
the link to the drive in the chat as well. Kevin,
I know. I'm just saying I'm making a separate request, right? Because sometimes I get a corrupted copy, but send it to me, and I'll make sure that all the PCI members get it afterwards. And thank you for being with us and doing it while you're traveling. Very generous of you.
We're always traveling during the pandemic. What the choice is?
There you go. Dave, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for being with us. And again, Ben Konsinski, we're really glad to have you as our newest member of the PCI Guests and Speakers Committee. Cheers.